Caitlin Clark's shocking visit to luxury motors. A lesson in respect. Caitlin Clark pulled into the parking lot of Luxury Motors, her flagship luxury car dealership in Sunville, her gaze sweeping across the sleek and polished vehicles displayed proudly in the bright sunlight. The heat of the midday sun shimmered off the chrome exteriors, almost giving them an ethereal glow, as she parked her modest SUV near the back of the lot. It was an unmarked spot, far from the front, hidden behind a cluster of high-end sedans. Today, Caitlin wasn't here as the owner, but as an observer looking to understand the true heartbeat of the dealership without anyone knowing who she was. Dressed casually in a faded gray hoodie, slightly worn jeans, and sneakers, Caitlin blended into the crowd. She didn't want to draw attention to herself. Rather, she wanted to see how the dealership was run when the new owner wasn't on display. Stepping out of her vehicle, Caitlin took a deep breath, feeling the coolness of the air-conditioned showroom just behind the front doors. She had acquired this dealership just a few months ago, and was now taking the time to see what was happening inside. She had been busy with meetings, schedules, and strategizing for months. Now it was time for her to get a true sense of how her business was running. She made her way towards the entrance, the sound of muffled chatter growing louder as she neared the glass doors. Inside, a small group of employees stood near the front desk, laughing and chatting. They seemed relaxed, almost too relaxed, as if they hadn't noticed the energy shift that Caitlin's entrance brought. She opened the door and stepped in, greeted by a sharp, cool rush of air from the air conditioning. The showroom was immaculate. Rows of polished luxury vehicles glinted under the bright overhead lights, their exteriors glimmering with pristine sheen. Caitlin paused for a moment, allowing herself to feel the difference in temperature and atmosphere before proceeding deeper into the showroom. As she moved further in, the casual conversations inside quickly hushed, and the employees' eyes flicked toward her. More than once. Caitlin noticed the subtle exchange of looks. She wasn't sure whether it was curiosity or judgment, but she didn't care to dwell on it. She had work to do. As she moved further into the space, one person stood out. Alina, the dealership's manager, stood on the opposite side of the showroom surveying the area. Alina had always exuded authority. She was an experienced, middle-aged woman who held the entire operation together with her strong-willed, sharp gaze. The tailored blazer she wore and the polished heels clicking against the floor gave her an air of efficiency, even as Caitlin noticed a faint tightness in the smile that Alina gave her when their eyes met. "Can I help you?" Alina asked, her tone cool and slightly dismissive. Caitlin kept her voice calm, making sure to not give away any hint of her identity. "Just here to look around," she said, gesturing toward the rows of cars. "Nothing in particular." Alina's gaze dropped briefly to Caitlin's sneakers and gray hoodie, and Caitlin could practically hear the unspoken judgment in the woman's eyes. There was a fleeting moment when Caitlin wondered how much of her outward appearance had already been written off in Alina's mind. But she didn't push the matter, wanting to see how Alina would proceed. Alina raised an eyebrow, her professional mask slipping for just a moment as her eyes narrowed. "Are you shopping for a car?" Her voice carried an edge of doubt that was almost imperceptible, but Caitlin caught it. "Maybe," Caitlin replied lightly, still smiling as she glanced at one of the sleek cars on display. "Well, we cater to a very specific clientele," Alina said. "Most of our inventory requires pre-qualification. Perhaps I could recommend a dealership more suited to your needs." Caitlin's smile remained, but her expression hardened just slightly. "You're assuming I'm not qualified?" she asked, her voice low but clear. Alina's eyes flickered with a brief flash of irritation, but she quickly composed herself. "I'm just trying to save you time. These vehicles start at 6 figures. Maybe something a little more budget-friendly would be better suited for you." Caitlin took in Alina's words. There was no mistaking the tone. This wasn't a sales pitch. It was an attempt to dismiss her based purely on assumptions of what Caitlin looked like. The weight of those assumptions hung in the air, but Caitlin kept her composure, her calm demeanor unshaken. "Nice car," Caitlin said, admiring a silver coupe nearby, its aggressive design standing out in the showroom. Alina didn't seem to notice the slight sarcasm in Caitlin's voice. Instead, she merely looked at the car briefly and forced a smile. "It is. But when you're ready to make a serious inquiry, we can set up an appointment with one of our consultants. For now, I'll have to ask you not to touch the vehicles. Caitlin stood still for a moment, a feeling of discomfort creeping in, as Alina's dismissive attitude was hard to ignore. But she did not let it affect her, stepping back from the car. She raised her hand casually, slipping it into her pocket. "All right," she said, still calm but with a new edge in her voice. "Let's hear it. What would you recommend for someone like me?" Alina blinked, taken aback by the question, but recovered quickly, her expression tight. "Something more budget-friendly, like I mentioned," she said stiffly. "Reliable, economical, practical." Caitlin's lips twitched into a faint smile, one that didn't reach her eyes. "Appreciate the effort," she replied evenly, but the dismissal stung. She had been assumed to be beneath the standards of this dealership, and it wasn't something she was going to let slide. She folded the list of cars Alina had handed her and tucked it into her pocket. Alina quickly regained her composure. "You know, luxury motors isn't for everyone. I'm just trying to be realistic with you. I don't want to waste your time." Caitlin's expression remained unreadable. "I understand, but it seems you've made an assumption about me that I don't quite appreciate." Alina opened her mouth, but before she could say anything, another employee called out to her, "Hey, Alina, the delivery guy's here." For a moment, Alina's attention wavered, but she quickly snapped back to Caitlin, her eyes narrowing as if to ensure she wouldn't wander too far. "Please just wait here," she said curtly, turning to walk away. Caitlin's gaze lingered on Alina's retreating figure, and her eyes flicked to the other employees, some of whom were still watching her. She had seen enough. As she turned her attention back to the silver coupe, she felt a growing sense of resolve. Alina returned a few minutes later, her clipboard in hand as if it were a shield. "All right, I've compiled a few options that might be more suitable for your situation," she said, her tone clipped. Caitlin tilted her head slightly, a small smile on her lips. "My situation?" she asked, an eyebrow raised in subtle challenge. Alina, unfazed, handed Caitlin a printed list of vehicles. Used cars, older models, and none of the luxury items that the showroom was known for. "These are reliable and more practical," Alina said, her voice tight. "They're just a little more affordable." Caitlin looked over the list for a moment, her eyes scanning the descriptions of pre-owned sedans, older SUVs, and hybrid vehicles. She quickly folded the paper, slipping it into her pocket. She didn't bother to continue the conversation, already knowing what needed to be done. She had observed enough to see the culture of exclusion embedded in the dealership's practices. Her voice dropped, calm but carrying the weight of her statement. "Thanks, but I'll be all right." The room held a heavy silence. Alina stood still, unsure of what to say. "Listen," Alina said finally, a tinge of frustration creeping in. "I've been doing this a long time. I know when someone is out of their depth." Caitlin's eyes widened slightly at the remark. She didn't flinch, though. Instead, her voice grew quieter but sharper. "Out of my depth." Alina's eyes narrowed. "This isn't a place for everyone. Luxury Motors is about catering to people woe." Caitlin interrupted her, her tone now unwavering. "It's about respect, Alina. And right now, I don't feel like I'm receiving it." Alina faltered for a moment, and Caitlin saw her briefly lose her composure. She wasn't sure how much longer she could maintain her forced smile. The tension between them was palpable, and Caitlin felt a small sense of satisfaction that Alina had begun to crack under the weight of her own assumptions. Then Caitlin reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone. "All right," Caitlin said nonchalantly, "let me give the owner a call. Maybe they'll have something to say about this." Alina's face shifted from confusion to disbelief. "The owner? What are you talking about?" Caitlin raised an eyebrow and began dialing, not looking back at Alina as she spoke into the phone. "Yeah, it's me. Everything's fine. Just a small misunderstanding. Could you let them know I'm here?" Alina's confusion deepened. She had no idea who Caitlin was speaking to, and the words hung in the air as the showroom grew quiet. Minutes passed, and Caitlin held the phone to her ear. Then, just as the tension seemed unbearable, the main door to the dealership opened. A sharply dressed man entered. Vincent, the dealership's regional director. His polished shoes clicked against the tiles, and his eyes immediately found Caitlin. Miss Clark, he said warmly, extending a hand. Caitlin returned the handshake firmly, a faint smile playing at the corner of her lips. Thank you for coming, Vincent. The room went still as the realization dawned on everyone. Alina's face turned ashen, her eyes wide in shock. You're the owner? Alina's voice was barely above a whisper. Vincent glanced at Caitlin, his professional demeanor shifting. Elena, I see you've already met Miss Clark, he said, his voice sharp but polite. This expansion is about halfway through the story and introduces a deeper exploration of the characters' thoughts and feelings, the tensions building toward a cultural shift. Let me know if you'd like me to continue or adjust anything further. Alina's mouth hung open, her entire body stiff as she processed the situation. I didn't realize, she stammered. Vincent nodded curtly. The owner doesn't usually stop by without notice. We should have let you know. Caitlin gave a soft laugh, shaking her head. It's all right. No harm done, she said, glancing at Alina. But I do have a question for you. If I hadn't been the owner, would you have treated me differently? Would you have assumed the same things about me based on my appearance? Alina's face flushed with guilt as she faltered, unable to respond. Caitlin's gaze lingered for a moment before she turned back to Vincent, her voice carrying a newfound authority. Let's gather everyone in the conference room. I think it's time we had a little chat about how things are run around here.